What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is A Geek's Garage, and today we're going to be putting the camshafts back into my 1991 Dodge Stealth twin turbo engine. We're starting to make some real progress here. You can see the engine in the background, the heads are on. So now it's time to get the original camshafts back in and continue on from there. The goal today is just to get the original camshafts back in, properly seated. Nothing really else at this point. I'm trying to take this slowly, but pretty soon we're going to be actually putting on the timing belt and actually trying to get the initial rough timing set in before we really start buttoning things up and maybe getting ready to put this thing back in the car. So yeah, stick around and let's see where we get today. Okay, so I think it's time for a reminder. I am not a mechanic. I don't know what I'm doing. I am reading a manual and watching a lot of YouTube videos. But if you're watching this and you're expecting the advice of an expert, I'm not an expert. So feel free to continue watching this. You'll get to see what happens when a non-expert tries to repair a very complex engine. Maybe it'll be really funny and it'll explode. Maybe it'll run just fine. But either way, keep in mind, not an expert. So I've seen a lot of comments and questions as people have been watching me do this rebuild and asking whether or not I'm checking tolerances and things like that. Whether some of it I'm doing off camera. And some of it I have been doing off camera. Quite honestly, some of them I don't have the equipment to do it with, so I haven't been doing it. But I did want to show, before I go ahead and put these cams in, these are the original cams that came with the car. In the repair manual, there's information on exactly what these things should be set to as far as the lobes and the lobe size. So I have a set of micrometers, and I've already gone through and zeroed this thing out with the adjuster. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use this, and I'm going to check each of the different lobes to see where they end up with respect to the documentation inside the manual. So for using one of these things, if you've never used one before, there's a end that spins. You can use this for large adjustments, and then once you get it to the point where you want it, you use this end piece, which has a small spring in it, and it just cranks down a little bit without over cranking. So we're going to go through and we're going to check each of the different lobes all the way down using this. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to crank it down. We're going to use that little adjuster on the end until it starts clicking, like so. Can then use this to lock it in place. I'm going to go ahead and set it down, and we'll go ahead and read it. As it goes forward, we know that it's at least an inch because that's where this starts reading from. So this is going to be an inch, and then you read it. We went past 3. We didn't get to 4 yet. You're going to have to trust me on that. It's a little hard to tell in the picture, but we haven't actually gotten to 4 yet. So the last reading was 1.375 because we got past the quarter tick. And then you start adding up what's on the wheel, 0.22. So we have 1.375 plus 0.22, or 1.397. And if we take a look at the manual, this doesn't measure out to the exact precision that the document has, which is out to what, 1/10, 100,000, 10,000th. It's not that accurate, but if you take a look at what the total range is, we can be off by 20,000th and still be within spec. So the first lobe is good. And now we're just going to go ahead, we're going to unlock the measuring device and go through and check all the rest of them. Welcome back. So it's not actually the next day, it is the next weekend from the last set of videos that I just recorded. And the reason for that is I went to go start putting the caps in, and I looked at them, and they were covered in 130,000 miles worth of oil and grunge, and I had never gone through and cleaned them. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to try and do it sort of right, I might as well go through and clean them. So I stopped, took them down, threw them in the ultrasonic cleaner, and then the weekend got away from me. So we're back here today. We're going to make another attempt to install the camshafts into my engine here. And quite honestly, I'm glad I didn't start doing it, because there was one other thing that I didn't do. We need to set the engine to top dead center. And the reason for that is the instructions also tell you where to position each of the different cams when you're putting them in. The 6G72 engine is an interference engine. Basically what that means is if the timing is not exactly right, mechanically set up, you're going to cause interference, and interference is just a really nice way of saying that your valves are going to smash into your piston heads. So in order to make sure that I'm not doing that, as I'm putting this thing together, I'm going to just make sure that I set this thing to top dead center, and then I should be able to go ahead and put in the cams and not cause any interference and not do any damage, or so goes the plan. So you're probably wondering, what am I doing? You just saw me put a cam on without any grease and not torque anything down right. What I'm trying to do is actually get the cam gears off the front, because as it turns out, I have a whole bunch of new seals, including the seals for the cams that I didn't even know I had. So I want to put them on, but in order to do that, you have to take the cam gears off. In order to take the cam gears off, there is a hex nut that you can hold on to in order to keep it from spinning. But they're torqued on pretty tight, and what I'm doing is just putting the caps on in order to ensure that as I'm doing this, it doesn't jump out of the engine and fall on the ground and get damaged. So it's just holding it in place. I'm going to go through and do all the right stuff in a little while and grease it up and all that kind of stuff, but right now I'm just trying to use it as a holder so that I can get the cam gears off, so that I can actually put the right seals in and do this thing right.
With the cam gears off the cams, I'm now ready to put the hydraulic lifters in before actually installing the cams. But prior to installing the hydraulic lifters, you need to prime them. So what I have here is just a small bucket of engine oil, and I'm using a small plastic piece that I actually found in my toolbox that can go in the top hole on the lifters. And basically you're just pushing that in because there's a check valve inside there, so I'm pushing down slightly on that check valve and then pumping up the hydraulic lifters, and you can almost see as I go through and do this some of the bubbles that'll actually come out as we're doing this, and that's the air coming out of the lifter as the oil is taking its place. So we need to do this for all of the different lifters before we go ahead and put the cams in.
Okay, so now that I've got the cam gears off, I'm going to go ahead and get the cams actually installed. One thing to note, the instructions actually show a picture, and it says to make sure that you orient the dowel in a certain direction. I had assumed that that would line up with the cam gear dimple for setting timing. They're completely different. So make sure if you're doing this and you haven't taken the gears off, that you find where the pin is that's in the cam, not the dimple in the gear itself.
The process for assembling these things was pretty easy. You want to make sure that you have the proper cams going back into the original slots, whether they're the intake or the exhaust. And really, it's just using a bunch of assembly lube, making sure that you get everything very lubed up, and then tightening down all of the caps. And just as with everything else in this engine, there is a order that they suggest that you put them in. So make sure that you're checking your service manual and following the proper order for putting the caps back on and seating everything down properly. With the rear side cam in place, we'll go ahead and we'll do the front ones and follow the same exact process. Lots of assembly lube and go through and affix the caps in the right order and in the right place.
All right, well, that's going to do it for another episode. Cams are in. Everything is torqued down to spec, which is really great. I did go through and check, make sure all the rockers are in place, nothing broke loose or anything like that when I was going through and putting everything in. So everything looks pretty good from my standpoint. One thing that I did think of, you're going to want to go and spin these things to make sure that they're sitting in there. Don't spin them because, again, I mentioned before, interference engine, you'll end up pushing the valves into some of your pistons. So assume that you did it right. At least that's what I'm doing. And we'll see if they actually spin when we go and actually try and set the timing belt on here and get the timing set properly. So with all of that, please make sure that you like, subscribe, leave comments down below. I really appreciate everything you leave and all the information that I've picked up there. Hopefully this is helpful, and I also really appreciate the words of encouragement from people encouraging me on to get this thing done. So with that, till the next one, see ya.